One of my favorite Buster Keaton films is the first film on this disc. It is Seven Chances. Let me tell you why I think this is one of Keaton's 2 or 3 best films. Seven Chances, coming up next. I'm holding up this case for a reason. It's the Coen collection, the Coen film collection, with a great restoration of both Seven Chances and Battling Butler. This is the version I'm working off of. You can find free versions of all of Keaton's work on the internet. They are usually low quality. I highly recommend getting this. This is the 2K version of Seven Chances. One reason this movie is great, the last 25 minutes are manic and fresh. They're as fresh as anything made in the last 25 years as far as a chase scene, a crazy sequence of events. It's cartoonish, of course, and absolutely delightful. I highly recommend watching this with children. I recommend watching this on a big screen with a lot of people. You will appreciate this movie as it was meant to be seen, with a number of people around, all laughing at this movie. You will have a better time than if you just watched it on your phone or by yourself in your home. Before I even go into the plot, let me tell you this movie has racy themes. Once you go into the silent film era, you're talking about a totally different moral system, value system, especially in terms of a few things, race and gender especially. This movie, and all silent movies, will turn off a number of people today of a totally different value system. So just be warned what's going on here. I think there's blackface in here and a couple other things like that. So just know that you're always going to have that problem with silent films. Now, if you can accept that stuff or stomach it, the plot is great. Here you have James Shannon. He's a lawyer. He's sort of a rich man. Buster Keaton plays him. His firm is in a lot of trouble and it would need some financial help. Well, it turns out he gets a notice that his grandfather's died, but his grandfather in his will stipulated, hey, you're going to get $7 million, which is worth hundreds of millions of dollars in today's money, by the way. But the will has a stipulation. James Shannon needs to get married by his 27th birthday, by 7 p.m. on his 27th birthday. Well, of course, as the plot would have it, that day that he receives the notice of the will is his 27th birthday. Thus, he only has a few hours to get married by 7 p.m. Otherwise, he forfeits the will, the $7 million. Now, luckily for James Shannon, he's got a love interest named Mary, and you see this in the opening of the movie that he has a hard time even talking to her about his love for her. As the seasons change, he doesn't change as he should, which is to say, I love you, will you marry me? So this will, of course, is an impetus for him to go to Mary and say, I love you, will you marry me? But his proposal to her is a bit stiff. It annoys her. She rejects him. That leaves James Shannon to just go, well, I need to find some woman to marry me so I can get $7 million. And what follows is a sequence of some of the most ridiculous marriage proposals ever put on film. Keaton's character, as a lot of these silent film characters were, is a naive doofus. He is also shy, and he's having to go up to random ladies on the street asking if they will marry him. At one point, his law firm partner, puts an advertisement in the paper saying, here's a man who will get $7 million if you marry him. And that sets off a wonderful, as I said, last 20 to 25 minutes of this movie, where pretty much every single woman who reads the newspaper notice comes to try to marry James Shannon. The movie has so many wonderful sight gags, chase scenes, that it'll just be delightful as entertainment. And even though it's almost 100 years old at this point, as I said, it's fresh and alive. However, there's a little bit more to this movie than just the entertainment value, and let me just briefly describe what that is. A lot of these silent features, and because it worked really well on film, have a horde of people, a mob, a great crowd, usually running after something. Keaton loves this gag to put hundreds of cops on screen and have them chase after one criminal. In this particular film, spoiler alert, it is a crowd of hundreds of females in veils coming after James Shannon, chasing him down the street and with reckless abandon. I find anytime we're dealing with large crowds in these silent films in particular, because it's the era for this, where you have the individual versus the masses. In the mass is the mob, or the demos, the democracy. Usually the mob, or the large group of people, represents or has the idea of a democracy or a force of a mass of people doing something. Of course, this is the time where there's a number of things going on with females, second wave feminism, they're getting the right to vote. There are also a lot of females in the United States, at least, who advocated for prohibition. They have a lot of legal and social and political power at this point, or they're gaining it, or it seems like they're gaining it to a number of people. Maybe that's the key, that seems like it. So in this movie, you have the demos of the female crowd coming after James Shannon. And it is a little bit, maybe, if you interpret it this way, of conservative reactionaryism. Or it's just the idea, the descriptive value of this, that females have a lot more power. Are moving and shaping more powerful men like James Shannon, who is a lawyer after all, and who stands to have a lot of money, even though he already has a lot of money. This force or power of the mass or the mob or the group of people is one of a number of forces in the movie. As the opening has it, there's the force of nature, the change of seasons, also the dog grows up, but there's stasis as well, that is, James Shannon will not change. So you have a basic theme, very basic, of change versus stasis, and the man, James Shannon, needs to change, and change with the times, because that is nature itself. Now, in this movie, there's a number of changes that he faces that try to get him to move towards marriage. Obviously, one is the will, the death of his grandfather, which is a major change to go from being alive to being dead. Another force is the females, who are forcing him to go somewhere. He's going to get away from them or towards them, but he has to go somewhere. And then there's the force of gravity, which later in the movie, it's the boulders coming down the hill, hitting him or nearly hitting him. And so something, nature itself, all the forces of nature, sexual reproduction, status seeking, the demos, or the democracy, the crowd of people, or boulders and gravity themselves will move James Shannon to fall in love and to get married as he ought to. Basically, all the universes are arrayed against this man to go get married. It's a strong mainstay in the movies of this period. Are bachelors going to remain bachelors or not? Is the bachelor lifestyle good or not? And the answer to in a lot of these movies is no. And so all these forces collide or move on the bachelor to get married, and that's definitely what's happening in this movie. I find this movie in general charming, delightful. I love, as I said, the chase sequences in this, and I find this to be, for me personally, I'm not arguing this as being objective, but for me personally, this is one of Keaton's 2 or 3 best films. I even like it a little bit better than The General, which is his most acclaimed film of all. I know that film probably is better in terms of cinematic value, but for me, I would prefer to watch Seven Chances over most of his movies. So I just love this, really, really love this movie. If you haven't seen it, I strongly recommend it, especially if you have kids who like movies. What do you think of Seven Chances or Keaton? Where would you rate it? What do you think of what I said? Let us know in the comments. And thank you. Please subscribe to this channel. Have a great day.